amazing in 2015, I'm fighting Robert E. Lee. This is, oh, it's almost hilarious. Those statues never should have been erected. The South lost.
Let's take down these statutes and put them in a place of proper remembrance, not reverence.
4 monuments to the Confederacy are set to come down in New Orleans.
The vote is considered one of the most sweeping moves by a U.S. city to cut ties with Confederate history.
But that's not what happened.
That's not what happened.
Backlash over a plan to remove these prominent monuments has led to death threats, intimidation, and even the intentional torching of a contractor's Lamborghini.
We're live out here at the Jeff Davis Monument. It is extremely chaotic right now.
We cannot have reconciliation without truth.
Okay. Here we go. This, for me, is the closest we can get to the actual Confederacy.
Somebody is going to abuse any institution.
People don't always take care of their objects well.
Right.
Including when that object is a person.
Including when it's a person.
We have intentionally misrepresented this history to our own citizens on purpose.
These people who are really bigoted, I bet we could just change their minds.
Why do you think that?
I don't know, because
Why do you hold that hope out, that illusion?
These stories are coming out. So I think we're in a different portal of time that these things are not going to be swept under the rug any longer.
Good afternoon and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that wants to shed a light on the fundamental contributions of African Americans to the building of this country. It's a show about Black excellence. So to exemplify this Black excellence, we have 2 really important guests here today who are presenting their film at the 2021 Tribeca Film Festival, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary. And specifically, welcome to C.J. Hunt, director and writer, and Roy Wood Jr., executive producer, respectively, of The Neutral Ground, which is a documentary, as you said, about memory, monuments, and how to break up with the Confederacy. Welcome to My Harlem Portraits.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, honorable introduction.
Respectively, Roy, respectively, man.
Thank you, respectively. Yes.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, this movie, it's amazing. It is part of the Juneteenth programming, and this film could not be more appropriate, I think, and fitting into this inflamed and really surreal political climate in which the GOP even refuses to admit what the rest of the world considers obvious, that the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill was a coup organized by domestic terrorists, instigated by the big lie spread by the former inhabitant of the White House, which I will not name. How can we expect to be told the truth about our past? And that's what you are talking about in this movie. The truth about our past is not being told. So, CJ, can you tell our viewers the origin and the context in which the idea for this film has matured in you? And Roy Jr., why did you decide to produce it?
Thank you. A quick thing about what you were just saying. I completely agree. You know, when we started this film in 2015, you know, I would tell folks, yeah, I'm making a film. It's about Confederate monument removal in New Orleans. And people treated it kind of like a small town provincial issue, like, oh, that's great. So it's a little history film. I am not happy for anything that has happened in the era of the last president who shall not be named. But I do think it provides folks with a frame for understanding this film. You know, we all know what it is like to witness a disinformation campaign be born right in front of our eyes, be told what you saw happened didn't actually happen. It wasn't an insurrection. It was free speech.
They were tourists, they just said. Yes.
These are tourists. You know, it wasn't, these aren't traitors attacking the government, trying to kill the vice president. These are patriots. So when you look then, you know, people can see that lie, that big lie being born in front of us, And I think it gives them different tools to be able to understand how the same thing happened after the Civil War. It wasn't about slavery. Forget all the things we wrote down on paper about how we're seceding to preserve slavery. It's about something else. And because of this last president, I think people can understand what that means.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, in listening to CJ, when he was explaining to me what the film was at the time, this was before Charlottesville. So this idea of this long winding journey of discovery, and as the things that originated in New Orleans with that one, with one Jefferson Davis monument, to see that fire start to spread into a national inferno, that wasn't something that I thought was going to happen. But to see CJ continue to follow that, by the time we started talking, it was just before Charlottesville. I was like, yeah, let's see where this goes. Why not be a part of this? Because it's not so much about, this film isn't so much about the truth as it is, why are you so against truth? Why are you so against that? And figuring out why people believe the things they believe.
And now, Roy and I have a day job where we see each other working on The Daily Show. And he is, the correspondent that I've worked with most. He was the first correspondent I ever worked with. And I feel a certain, when we're working together, I can move at a certain speed, and we have a familiarity. So he was perfect for the project because, I talked to him over a number of years about it, of, hey, this is just what I'm doing. But we already have a language of, okay, where does the joke go? Where do we need a joke to give everyone a breath? That was helpful for this. But back in 2015, I didn't know Roy. I wasn't working at The Daily Show. I was just some failed teacher living in New Orleans, trying to make a career in comedy. And I was watching a lot of things from The Daily Show, from Sam B, from The Nightly Show on TV, and trying to make similar things. And for me, whenever I get angry, I make comedy. I make something to sort of roast what I think is dumb or discriminatory. And, in the wake of the Charleston massacre, it felt like, hey, we can all be clear about white supremacy and what these monuments are. But in New Orleans, as the mayor is trying to take down these monuments,
and he's a white mayor.
He's a white mayor. Shout out to all the white mayors out there. Keep doing it. But when he said, hey, I just want to move these monuments, there were white New Orleanians who were like, that's the end of the world. You are destroying history in a city where old things are moved all the time. So I think that's where the genesis of the project was. Yes. Can we poke fun at? Can we show the absurdity of folks who want to spend all of their energy to hang on to 130-year-old monuments to slave owners?
And what is funny is that you started the movie with the meeting, the city council meeting, in which they were deciding, and in the end they decided that they would take these monuments down. And you start with all these conflicting ideas expressed by different people, and then you come to the neutral ground. So I think it's fantastic to start the movie in that way, because it's so contrasting,
I just wanted to mess you up.
Clearly is not a neutral ground.
No.
Absolutely not. And I want to remind people, yes, because I didn't do in the beginning, that both of you work on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah. So Trevor Noah is one of my idols. So I hope I get tickets from that after this show. Okay.
Oh, now we know your game. Now we see the scheme. We see why we're here. We see your long game.
Maria.
Okay, so and you're talking about this lost cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, what is the lost cause for those who don't know?
Okay, Roy, do you want to say you're losing the fight analogy? Analogies are helpful here.
You give it.
All right. When Roy and I were talking about, there's a dense history to explain here, and when we were talking about the lost cause and how to explain it, Roy said simply, look, if I got in a fight and I got my ass kicked, and then someone gave me the power to write the story of what happened in that fight, you can bet I'm going to take some liberties. And that is what happened with the Civil War. You know, that it's like, if you get to write the story of what went down, yeah, you were going to change a few details. You know, I was fighting for freedom. I was way overpowered by a enemy of greater strength. So that is what happened with the Lost Cause. We saw it with the last president saying, you know, actually I won by a landslide. Before the Civil War, in all throughout the winter of 1860 and 1861, Southern states, as they are seceding, are putting down on paper, this is about slavery.
Yes.
Mississippi, we are firmly identified with the cause of slavery. The secession commissioner for Louisiana looks forward to the formation of a Southern Confederacy to preserve African slavery. The whole argument about why secession is valid is because they believe that the North broke their compact to return fugitive slaves. When they say states' rights, they're cutting it short. In all of the secession documents that you can look up on a helpful website called google.com, they will explain in long form our states' rights to slaves as property, to property in slaves. They wrote all of it down. After the war, they were like, ooh, that's a bad look. So then they started this narrative, this story about their lost cause, where it was actually about freedom. And it had nothing to do with slavery. And it was about states' rights. Which rights? We're not going to get into that. Just rights in general. You know, it was really about, you know, making the federal government smaller. From the same people who in 1861 were asking for a bigger federal government to try to make Massachusetts return their slaves. So it is the most effective disinformation campaign, the best propaganda campaign ever created in America. And it's why today we still say states' rights.
Roy, what did you think when CJ went to talk about with his dad? Because I think that conversation was hilarious, really, but it was very dramatic, talking about what you felt when you were a little boy. What did you think about conversation, and why did you decide to put that in your film?
To me, you know, CJ had me watch down some of that stuff. I think the only question was where to put it in the film. I think that it's, number one, it's important because it's about, you know, in a smaller part, CJ's own identity and connection with Blackness and Black history, and how our parents influence us as Black people in caring and knowing about that. Because in most Black households, you are taught, your parents almost serve as an addendum to the history lesson that you get in school. Like, okay, I know you heard about all that, but also let me tell you about this. And the older you get, the more you gravitate towards your parents' account of your history than the one you were taught formally in the school system. So I thought it was natural, as CJ went on this journey, to kind of check in on his father as kind of this Morpheus North Star, you know, for lack of a Matrix
Don't
reference.
say Morpheus to him. He loves Morpheus and talks about Morpheus nonstop.
He's baldhead like him too. Give him some shades.
No.
I thought that it was great also to see this from the perspective of an older Black person that lived in a much more oppressive time for America, a more overtly oppressive, because I think it's still here. It's just, it's much more slick now. But no, I thought it was that, and also it was funny. Yeah, and also CJ's daddy is funny, so it was also a great way, when needed, to come out of something heavy, to have someone giving perspective, but in a lighter way. Because I think that was the thing that was important to me with this piece, was not having it go too far to the left.
Yes.
For me, the only reason my dad is in the film is because I showed an early cut, even before Roy saw this, I showed an early cut of the film to a group of filmmakers of color that I trust called Firelight Media. And the consensus was, you know, they took a second, were like, CJ, this is funny.
Yes.
But bro, what are you doing? Like, what is this for? And I, you know, explained, well, you know, in the film, I'm playing a character, and that character believes in, and they were like, hold on, bro. this is your first documentary. You need to know that in a documentary, you are not playing a character. And that was a learning point for me because, you know, by that time I was producing on The Daily Show. And one of the conversations we often have is, okay, like, who is the correspondent's character in this situation? You're allowed to play dumber than you are. You're allowed to play an opposite perspective. But, you know, that was a learning point in making documentary that's like, no, this is about, you need to show us insights to you and why you're obsessed with the Confederacy. And, you know, I was explaining, well, I just think about white supremacy all the time. That's all we talk about at home. My dad gave me a book of lynching photographs when I was young. And they were like, then go talk to your dad, because I think that probably has something to do with why you're making the film. And then, you know, you see the scene from there. But I think that there are a lot of thinking about having a son myself. I have the thought of, how do I make sure he feels as Black as I do? Or how do I give him the mindset to be Black in America? So I think that that is what that scene is about, that for a lot of dads, they go right to history. And the core of that identity is, you need to see what was done to the ancestors.
That's fundamental. You quote, like you did before, quotes from official Federation documents. And at a certain point, you decided to participate in this reenactment of Civil War battle with white supremacists.
Historical reenactors. We got to use the right term. They're not calling themselves white supremacists. They call themselves living historians.
There's a lot of living historians
Sorry.
in Confederate uniforms.
Living historians are on the rise in America.
Right. What did you think about him doing that? Did you think he was going crazy?
No, I didn't think he was going crazy. I thought it was something essential to the story. I mean, The Daily Show, what I've learned as a correspondent is that that thing that makes you uncomfortable or that feels a little weird, it's probably going to be something that is extremely compelling to see unfold on camera. And that was, I believe it was John Oliver who gave me this advice a long time ago. He said, when you're out and you're covering something that's tense, if you feel uncomfortable or they feel uncomfortable, then there's probably something good happening, and stick with it. Keep rolling. So, you know, as far as fearing for his life, no, he was there. He was with cameras. So if something crazy was going to happen, it would have happened well before they rolled tape. I was intrigued, though, to see what CJ would become on the other side of that, or if there was any way to, I don't want to say change these people's minds, but they seem to be willing to be open to a measured, intelligent, non-shouting match conversation. And they were. But they also didn't change none of their mind. There was no putting no logic in any of these people.
But I do think that's
CJ?
I do think that's, you know, it was important for me to go into their territory because so far we had only talked to one living historian. And I think, you know, I was worried that the film would be open to critique of, okay, so you just found a guy who believes in wacky stuff and is willing to say slavery wasn't that bad. It's like, no, we need to go into that territory and show it's not one guy. This is a culture. This is a whole set of memory about people whose nostalgia for the past depends on the notion that slaves willingly fought for the Confederacy because they loved master and they loved home, and actually slavery wasn't that bad.
And the master was so nice to them.
Yeah, so it was about legitimacy for the argument about the reason to go there. I do think that Roy is right that when you're watching it, you're like, maybe he's going to change these people's minds. Yeah. And being there, I was like, maybe I'm going to change these people's minds. And I think the scene ultimately is in the film because I think we should be asking why we even have that impulse in a film. Why do we think that the happy ending of this film is going to be a couple of people who appreciate white supremacy suddenly realizing that that's bad? And I think that's productive for audiences because I think a lot of white audiences want stories of reconciliation. They want a story that makes them feel like Green Book, of like, wow, we are just people. And if we just meet in the middle on the neutral ground and talk. And I think that scene shows that this hearts and minds approach is to some extent a lie.
I also learned another thing from your movie, that the neutral ground is not just the title you use, but it is a physical place in New Orleans. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, every city has, a little grassy strip between two streets, some places called the median. But in New Orleans, that's an actual place that people hang out, spend time, party. It's where you would go to barbecue. If you were meeting folks for Mardi Gras, that's where you're standing to catch beads. So the neutral ground in New Orleans is meant to be a space for everyone. On an unrelated note, it's also where the Confederacy put all of their monuments. So the space for everyone is filled with monuments to slave owners and folks who called themselves the White League and vowed to put blacks in their place. And I think, well, that's really dramatic in New Orleans. I think that dichotomy speaks for the whole country.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you were talking about also something else I didn't know. You went to see that plantation. Mm-hmm. And that monument that was really, really strong with the heads on those sticks. Tell us about that. What was that about?
Number one, as a Black man, I'm not looking to go to plantations very often. Not often at all, really. But for this film, it was important because, in Louisiana, they have the Whitney Plantation, which is one of the only plantations in the country, exclusively focused on the experience of the enslaved. So most plantations are like, welcome to the plantation. Enjoy the architecture. This is the master's bedroom. You'll notice the wainscoting in this. They're focused on the building.
Yes.
Maybe you would like to come get married here. They're like weird theme parks for racist nostalgia. But this place is like, hey, let's talk about the people who lived here and were forced to work here. And this monument specifically is to the 1811 German Coast Uprising, where over 200 enslaved people rose up while their white masters were partying in New Orleans, went to go free all the other slaves in the area, and then went to go march on New Orleans to battle white New Orleanians to try to end slavery in the United States. Have any of the three of us ever heard of that before this film?
I never.
Roy, had you heard about that?
No, sir.
Your teachers weren't like, let me tell you about the 1811 German Coast Uprising. It's the biggest slave rebellion in American history, and none of us have ever heard of it. At best, I got like 3 textbook pictures of Harriet just like running in a swamp. Like that's what we teach kids about slaves seizing their own freedom. So that monument was helpful to be like, no, this is how you tell a story in public about that. It wasn't just a bunch of Black people waiting to get freed by Abe. It was people rising up and being rebels.
And this is important to tell because I think there are some critics that say why Black people don't do something if they think it's so bad and so on and so on. Now you're telling us, well, they have been trying to do something for 400 years. But
when you see the numbers, it's like hundreds of thousands of slaves escaped, seized their own freedom. And then so many of them then joined the Union Army and turned the tide of the war. Lincoln himself was like, we couldn't have won this war without all these Black people. And that is not the story we tell children, even to this day.
It's erasure. It's erasure at best.
And towards the end, you also talk about 52 unmarked sites where people were sold, that this new movement that has come out is marking now in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that.
I moved to New Orleans after college in 2007, but I had gone there during a spring, while I was in college. And I remember walking by this place and it says, and it's in the movie, it says Pierre Maspero's Restaurant. And then there's a plaque on it that says Pierre Maspero's Slave Exchange. And that's just what it is like to move through the French Quarter. Yeah. You want to know what tourists were going there for in the 1800s? They were going there for slaves.
Slaves.
New Orleans was the nation's biggest slave market. The St. Louis Hotel, which is now, I don't know what it's called now, but it's a fancy hotel, used to be the biggest slave market in that area. So I think that is not a story that's in people's minds as they're, getting daiquiris and getting drunk on hand bombs and taking pictures with a horse. But I do think that New Orleanians are like, we need to mark this space, because maybe if you understand how rooted this place was in the oppression of Black bodies, you won't be asking questions like, why are Black people marching in the streets today?
That's right. Wow, I had no idea about this. 2 more questions because we are really coming to the end.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you say, which timeline are we on? What happens on the backside of distraction?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I feel like, where we go from here as a society, I think we're already seeing that, and I really hate to say this, but there just seems to be so many people entrenched in denying just what the truth is. Before we can even decide whether or not to put it in a textbook and educate someone on it, there's still people who think that Joe Biden won't be president after August. So,
I didn't know that that's a new one.
Don't Google it. Trust me. Stay out of those weeds. I just think that, where we are right now is a society that is very, very much entrenched in their views. And I think the biggest benefit that we have right now is the internet and social media, because when you look at young people, they're getting a lot more information about the world from outside. Like in my day, it was strictly whatever was in the textbook and whatever you found at the library from your own hustling. But at least now, the truth and some alternate versions of pushing back on traditional ideologies, you could scroll right past that on the internet and maybe stumble onto something that helps to educate you and help shape your views in a more well-rounded manner than what's been set up, based on, per our government.
Yeah, that is, thank you to both of you for making this movie, because it is a wide opener and an eye opener.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way you did it, with the sarcasm and the irony and your humor, it makes it even more desecrating. And you really have to laugh.
I want it to be helpful. We didn't know when it was going to be done. I think it is now done at a time where we really need some of the stuff in this film. And so I just hope that, whenever someone has said the most racist things to me, or whenever ever someone has gaslit me and been like, racism isn't real, he should have not been resisting, you're making it up. Whenever those situations happen to me, I always feel unprepared. Even when I write notes, I always just feel like I don't know what to say in the moment. So I feel like I hope this film makes people feel prepared. I hope it makes you feel like you have arrows in the quiver. Like if you are a student and your teacher is telling you that this was about states' rights, I hope the film is helpful. If you're in a small Southern town where the all-white male city council is protecting a monument, a Confederate monument in front of the courthouse where justice is distributed, and they're saying this was about freedom, I hope this film is helpful. If you are in a state where the governor is passing laws against critical race theory and telling you to teach their kids less, I hope this film is helpful. It is not enough to just open people's eyes. I hope it also, this is not just for I hope white supremacists feel less white supremacists after this. I hope this film makes young Black and brown people feel like, yeah, that is the truth. And now we're going to move in power knowing that's the truth, whether that's taking down monuments, whether that's, opposing some of these ridiculous lawmakers. I want folks to feel like this is the truth. That is a weapon. We now are equipped for this fight. or more equipped from the fight that they're already doing.
Thank you. And Roy, last words. We are really at the end.
I just want people to be able to watch this and take from it at least a wealth of knowledge in that you're not alone in thinking what you think and fighting for what is right. And if you're someone that has been entrenched in one thing one way and you've only thought about the world one way, you have to step out of that and just see what else is out there. Just see. And if you still feel like that after all of that, all right, fine.
We did what we
But at
could.
least just see. Yeah, exactly.
You know, just spend 82 minutes trying it out. That's all the film will take. Just see. And then if you don't like it, you can go back to white supremacy.
Thank you so much. I love the movie. I love this conversation. Let's keep in touch. I like to do this. I do this show every week. It airs every week. So we can have more conversations about this. Okay.
Maria, thank you so much. And all your viewers, if you're into this, you can see the film for free all of July, starting July 5th on PBS.
On PBS. Thank
Free.
you so much.
Wonderful.
Free.
Bye.
This
Give
is
us free.
Remember. Okay.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you, and thank you for being at My Harlem Portraits. See you next Saturday, same time, 12:30. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Maria.